Healthy skepticism is good,
right?
In the internet age.
There are going to be some hills that we need to die on, but a lot of these are not that.
All the attention that we pay to things. Attention is the most important currency that exists on the internet. If you give your attention, your currency away so flippantly, you're not going to have any time for Jesus.
Nuance is so much more powerful than just wielding the sword. So I actually don't know anything about Lord of the Rings.
Oh, dude, that's quite.
Is it good?
I mean, there's not a lot of twerking on Satan involved in that franchise. Hey, I'm Josh, and with me, as always, is Hansel. Welcome back to Kingdom Thinking. Lil Nas X. You've heard of this guy before? Okay, so Lil Nas has created a new song, Montero, Call Me By Your Name, right? That has a lot of people in the Christian community, how we say, up in arms.
It's got them shook.
Yeah, that's another way. Good, very cultural relevance. Good job connecting with Gen Z there. So basically, right, in this video, Lil Nas is on his way to heaven. And before that, though, he seems to like engage in some type of promiscuity with the garden snake, right, as it were. And instead of, ascending fully to heaven, a stripper pole appears out of nowhere, and he rides it down to hell, and then ends up like grinding on the devil before killing him to assume his mantle. And so this is a really interesting kind of cultural statement to me for a lot of reasons, right? One is, as we'll talk about in the video, right, there's been a lot of different reactions that the Christian community has had, from like saying we need to boycott this guy, or I can't believe he, hooked all of the kids with Old Town Road and then he dropped this on top of them to try and like
a bait and switch?
Yeah. And so I wanted to kind of chat through some of the different perspectives that we've seen, and talk about like what should the Christian response to a video that is, certainly several steps beyond provocative, that's making quite a declarative statement. Yeah. But this is why it struck me as so important for us to chat about, because in one of his tweets, in reference to the video, he said this specifically. He goes, quote, "I spent my entire teenage years hating myself because of the stuff y'all preached would happen to me because I was gay. So I hope you are mad, stay mad, and feel the same anger you teach us to have toward ourselves," unquote. That's a pretty telling kind of piece to me, partly because as a youth pastor, right, this applies to people in my guild, trade, profession, directly, right? And so this is a direct indictment of people who are representative of kind of the world that I'm in, but also it's something about the larger conversation about the way that the traditional Christian ethic has now kind of shifted or is being seen in the larger discussion for America at large, right? In kind of this pushback or this little conversation. So when we talk about this idea of what our conversation is going to look like, we're going to examine this from several different positions within the Christian faith. And one of the reasons I want to do that is to show that there's not like a monolithic response to this situation. Okay. And so why don't you go ahead and set us up with our first person that we're going to look at and kind of analyze.
Good. So by way of recap, our question is, should Lil Nas X be canceled?
Yeah. And can Christians cancel people? Do we have that type of societal power anymore?
That kind of clout?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's interesting because Christians have responded in different degrees of cancellation to different things, right? In the previous episode, we talked about, when Eminem came out early 2000s, it was like, that's the devil kind of thing, right? And so, all right, let's look at the first person.
Yeah.
The first person that offers a perspective on this is Greg Locke. Greg Locke is a prominent evangelical pastor, very, very conservative, you can say?
Fundamentalist, probably.
Okay. Of the fundamentalist tradition.
Yeah.
And in his weekly sermon, Locke calls Lil Nas X a thug. That's a quote. For his connection to the shoes. Oh, yeah, because there's the shoes thing behind it, right?
Yes.
So this is a whole thing, too.
Yeah, so this is a secondary issue, right? So Lil Nas X partners with a company, like an aftermarket company called Mischief, that buys 666 pairs of, I think it's Nike Air Maxes.
Yeah.
And they designed them to have a pentagram on it. They sell all 666 pairs for $1,018, which is a reference to Luke 10:18 about seeing Satan fall from heaven, right?
Right.
Which just makes me think, by the way, that whoever was in that marketing department literally just
is very literate.
Well, they just typed Satan verses in scripture into Google and just like found a thing and then just put it on there.
Right.
But that's neither here nor there. And so, yeah, so we can kind of dive more into that in a little bit.
Yeah. So the shoes thing is interesting.
Yeah.
They're supposed to have like one drop of human blood or whatever the case is.
Of some mischief employee too. It's like who gets bled out for that. There, which is, yeah, anyway.
So it's this whole like elaborate scheme, right? And so the one response is he's a thug, which I didn't even know who Lil Nas X was. He told the congregation, whoever he is, I had no idea. Locke said that he would never be able to listen to the rapper's music again because it's a bunch of devil-worshipping, wicked nonsense. You think I'm going to stand for that? You've lost your mind. You tell Lil Nas X I said so. Bunch of Satanism, bunch of wickedness, bunch of devilism, bunch of demonism, bunch of psychotic wickedness. So a very passionate response to counter, right? And stand over and against.
So how does that hit you?
So this is interesting because one of the things that we were talking off camera, which I thought was significant, is even some of the, like our producer, right? He was like, wait, this is the same guy who wrote Old Town Road? Mm-hmm. And like a very, at least seemingly innocuous pop, catchy song, like kids are listening to it. It's great. So I think part of this response is, at least for people who know him, there's like a feeling of betrayal almost. Sure. Like, whoa, this is somebody who was cool. Somebody who was, again, he's tamed, he's harmless, he's not somebody that we have to censor for our kids, right? Now he comes out with this. What's going on? I think, so anger is a secondary response, right? So people get angry because they feel something else, right? Whether that's fear, again, betrayal, how am I going to parent, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not surprised by this response. I think that this is a common Christian response to a lot of things. Yeah. This is how I was taught about Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon and
Harry Potter.
Yes. Yeah. Harry Potter. I mean, I wasn't allowed to watch Lord of the Rings. So I actually don't know anything about Lord of the Rings.
Oh, dude, that's quite.
Is it good?
I mean, there's not a lot of twerking on Satan involved in that franchise.
So, I mean, all that to say is there's a very kind of consistent response in generally conservative Christian traditions of what would now be labeled as the cancellation, right? The book burnings, the Disney movie kind of destruction fest and everything. Like, okay, yes, that's one response. Yeah. Now, my question is, what's the kind of like, what's the intended goal and the what's being trying to accomplish through that? That would be my question. What do you think, in all fairness, that people are trying to accomplish with something like that response?
To me, it seems like a desire to like interpret Romans 12 quite emphatically, right? Like to be in the world but not of the world. There, and so if I'm granting it like the best position that I can think of, I think it's from
it's
that.
Preservation, it's purity.
Yeah, it's not wanting to mince Christ
at
the expense, or it's not wanting to mince culture at the expense of Christ.
That makes sense. I hadn't thought about that. So I've heard like, I think it's in Colossians, what do the light and the darkness have to do with each other? Right. I've had that quoted at me a lot. So there's kind of like a preservation of purity by separation. Yeah. Right? Yeah. That makes sense. Okay, so I get that. What are some of the limitations of this?
Well, so he didn't listen to him before, right? He tells you in his quote, I didn't even know who Lil Nas X was. And then he says, I can never listen to his music again. It's like, but this seems to be kind of the commonality for this response, right? Like there's not a lot
like, I didn't care about you before, but now I really don't care about you.
I definitely have no idea who you are, right? And so, and you know, in this one being a little bit more tongue in cheek with this, right? Like it ends up, kind of being just like a self pat on the back, right? Where it's like, oh, I didn't engage in that. Look how Jesus-y I am. Yeah. And now I'm definitely not going to engage in that because I'm so Jesus-y, right? True. So it's like the circular
There is kind of a self-righteousness to the cancellation of that. That's interesting. Now, you know, maybe we can give him the benefit of the doubt, but it does seem that those are some of the, at least, kind of cultural features of it, right? Sure. There's like a Christian culture that's above it.
Yeah. In a desire to communicate your message, right? Like calling, as a white pastor, calling a black rapper a thug probably conjures up some more problematic.
Is he white?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, probably conjures up more difficulties, you know, for that. And so it seems to be okay.
Unhelpful?
Yeah, it seems to be okay with being not necessarily tone deaf culturally, but like very non-PC for the sake of like we're taking this specific stance, and that's part of Locke's persona, right? In a lot of other ways too.
Got it.
So this is kind of Locke's step with him.
Yeah, that's
general.
interesting. So in my experience, you can work that hard to preserve purity by separation, take what would be considered the high ground.
Right.
But then the limitation of that is you've essentially shortcutted any influence you could ever have.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, you
Because
chopped it at the knees.
You're intentionally saying, I'm not even going to engage you because I'm better than you.
Yeah. It's cutting off your nose to spite your face. I mean, ostensibly.
So we would probably say this is one of the more limiting perspectives. So like, granted, right? I probably, if I had kids, I probably wouldn't show this to my kids,
Correct.
right? I saw it once and I was like, yeah, that's probably enough. So like you can be wise,
right,
and discern and say like, oh, that's not great. I'm probably not going to engage that.
Yeah.
But to intentionally draw the line as this otherness, the separation of that seems to be a short-sighted, missiological or evangelistic perspective, or it's at least a limited one, right?
There are times when discernment must lead to exclusion, right?
True.
But you need to be very sparing in how you use that because of the declarative emphasis that you're making as a Jesus follower,
right,
when you take that position,
right?
Because you are very sincerely reinforcing negative stereotypes that he already maintains about the church, how many young people already feel about the church, and you are, again, I mean, genuinely cutting your nose off to spite your face because you can't reach, you've automatically tuned people out. Now, there are instances where it's appropriate to do that,
and
right?
You should do that.
You have to do that on some standards.
Yes.
It's just not a card that should be, in my opinion, your first draw.
Correct. It should be a seldom kind of used.
Yeah.
It's a hill to die on. You got to pick carefully.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
For sure. So, and then this one is probably my favorite response of all, just because it's the most interesting to me personally.
Yeah.
So Candace Owens, who is, popular public figure, public thinker. I'm pretty sure she's identified as
she does.
Conservative.
Yeah, she calls
Christian.
herself a conservative Christian.
Okay. She said, and this is a quote, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I want to read this. We've turned George Floyd, a criminal drug addict, into an icon. We are promoting Satan's shoes to wear on our feet. We've got Cardi B named as Woman of the Year. But we're convinced it's white supremacy that's keeping Black America behind. How stupid can we be?
Yeah, so we'll leave the conversations of George Floyd and Cardi B to the side.
Yeah.
Because that's probably...
It's a little more peripheral.
Oh, yeah, it's its own video, really, there. But yeah, so her reference to the Satan shoes, right, to wear on our feet, it's a whole different perspective.
What do you understand that she's trying to say? Being as charitable as possible.
Yeah, I think for her, right, when she tries to look at the issues that Black America is facing, I think she looks at them as far more currently as self-induced than systemically induced, right? I think that's probably what she would say, or at least close to in terms of that. And so, and part of the examples of that, I mean, and she has said this specifically with Cardi B, so you could probably apply it to Lil Nas X, okay? And it's like, look at who we tend to glorify, right, culturally, and they happen to be, Black and I think Cardi B, I don't think she's Black, I think she's Dominican.
Yeah.
And so in the idea though, like being like these, black skin or darker skin entertainers are people that we cling to as Black society, and those are where our problems are far more frequently to be talked about and dissected than just simply saying white supremacy would be, right? And so I think she's trying to draw attention to what is glorified more so than anything else.
That's a really interesting point, actually, because so if the argument is the moral compass or the influence that we gather, the value set that we attach ourselves to with these icons, that's far more significant of an indicator for how we live our lives and some of the ailments that we have in our lives. That's interesting.
Because culture is always upstream of everything else.
Right. So without getting too much into the weeds, right? Like that could be true.
Sure.
And
particularly because
the other
in
things
America
could be true as well.
Well, yeah, because specifically in America, like black entertainers are glorified, right? Like by white America, by black America. Like, I mean, they are truly
by
prized.
everybody.
Yeah,
which is interesting, right? Like that could be an episode in itself, taking the black experience of like pro athletes or rappers or celebrities, and then trying to understand that in light of the black experience as a whole, right? But so as a response itself to the video or to this idea, I mean, I think there's some merit there that's saying like, so are we going to glorify this? Are we going to stream this? Are we going to make this go viral?
Yeah.
Is that really what we want to do? And if so, at what cost to our own moral detriment at large? That's interesting.
Yep.
What do you think are some of the limitations?
I feel really weird about mixing George Floyd with Cardi B, right? Those feel like apples and oranges that probably don't belong in Lil Nas in that conversation as well. Right. I do think it's an overlooking of where this video is coming from, right? Like Lil Nas X is really apparent in this. He also tweeted out over the weekend that the idea was like, you know, I've had 9 months to prepare for this campaign, right? And he's been intentional about all of these things. Now, the Nike lawsuit was a little bit of seemed like a little bit of a curveball he didn't anticipate. But the whole idea, as we'll talk about in a second, for him seems to be, in terms of the response, is a little bit more troll or a little bit more baity, a little bit more trying to get people involved. Yeah. I mean, and it's worked. It's
provocative.
Got over 30 million views, right, just in the first couple days that it came out. And so I think it's kind of missing a little bit of the point there on a lot of the main objective of what Lil Nas X is trying to do.
Got it. He's not promoting himself as an example to be emulated in this particular video.
Yeah, and he says
so the accusation kind of like misses the point.
Yeah. And he's very clear about that up front, right? He talks about, people who tweeted at him about how did you go from Old Town Road to this? He's like, I sing about, lean and adultery in Old Town Road. Like, you guys should be paying better attention. It's your job as individuals to monitor what your kids consume, right? And so if you don't agree with what I create, that's the beauty of the internet. It's like you can go somewhere else and you can go do something else, right? So Lil Nas really pushes back against that idea. So I think she kind of overlooks that.
Okay. All right, and who's our third?
Yeah, so this one is a little bit of a way different response, in my opinion. This is Carlos Whittaker. He's a Christian thought leader who really works out of like Tennessee area, right? Kind of, and does a lot for speaking and engagement. He's got a pretty solid, pretty big Instagram following. And so his response to this was, when somebody asked if this was real on Twitter, he goes, "It is real." And his exact quote was, "We have failed Lil Nas." And here's what I liked on his Instagram stories. He did this long thing that's saying, "We aren't called to be appalled." He says, "We are called to run towards those who may appall us and love them fiercely. If we don't, then this isn't on those who shock us, it's on us." Right? He goes, continuing on, he says, "Not only are we called to go to those who are labeled, quote, deviant, but we are actually called to, quote, get in their chariots, not point our fingers and drop our jaws in shock. Get in their chariots, don't gawk at their chariots," right? And this is a reference to Acts 8 and Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch, right? When he goes to him and, explains what the gospel is and doesn't just kind of leave him on his way. And then he references the fruit of the Spirit, right? He says, just do this all day, every day, right? Love, joy, peace, patience, like be kind to people. And then 13-year-old Lil Nas X won't feel the need to make Satan shoes when he's 21, right? So his conversation is far more addressing the systematic root or the root of the issue rather than the symptoms.
Exactly.
Right?
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
The underlying issues.
Yeah.
So interesting. What do you understand this response to mean?
This one feels a little bit more in line with...
More like pastoral?
Yeah, this one feels more in line with me as somebody who interacts with people with a pastoral heart more frequently, right? And particularly in the way that I see Jesus, right? Because and nothing in his response does he say that this is okay or this is good or this is something that we should be stoked on. It's like there's nothing like that, right? But we already know those things, right? You can watch the video and as a follower of Jesus be like, yeah, that's not good. It's like it doesn't take, a theologian of Bonhoeffer caliber to understand like grinding on Satan is probably not a cool way to go, let alone murdering him and then like assuming his mantle, right? And so the notion though of saying like, why would we be shocked when the world does what the world does, right? Our job is to go and try and again change the world, right? And we change the world through the transformative love of Christ. And this makes more sense to me.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I have two thoughts on that are really pressing for me. One is exactly that, where over against the separatistic perspective of the first pastor, right? I think the instinct to separate and to withdraw is out of fear.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want the world to infect me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but that's because you're supposed to be infecting the world.
Yeah, for sure.
So there seems to be a totally opposite orientation of that.
Mm-hmm.
That's my first thought.
Mm-hmm.
And my second thought is, just like what you said, when Christians are surprised that non-Christians behave like non-Christians, we're kind of missing the point already.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Not only that, why do Christians expect non-Christians to behave like Christians?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's totally missing.
So
Paul,
now,
at least.
granted, there have to be ground rules for a society to have civility, right, and to have order and flourishing, at least in general loose terms. Yeah, there has to be a code of ethics, et cetera, right? But someone who obviously doesn't identify as a Christian is making an anti-Christian video. Like, that should not surprise us.
Right.
Now, what I really love is how he's saying, not only does it not surprise me, but it makes me want to know more. Like, hey, how are you doing? That's a different question, isn't it?
Yeah, entirely. Because it drops all combative pretenses.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
I think that if on a personal level we could commit to at least, we're called to love our neighbors, right? But if you don't want to love people who don't think like you, will you at least have a level of a witness that says that somebody does?
Yeah, for sure.
Right?
For sure.
That Christ does. So, think about that. That on the one hand, we can say, yeah, I don't want my kids watching this. It's probably not great. On the other hand, if there's anger or whatever the case may be about it, is it matched by sympathy, compassion, love? And that these things aren't excluding each other, but that they're actually powerfully interrelated.
Yeah, they're informing one
another. So that if there's a Christian around him who is in his circle of influence, that the question that you should be asking isn't like, why, what's wrong with you? It's, hey, how are you doing, man? What's going on?
Yeah, precisely.
Assuming that this is kind of serious, but like you said, there's reason to think he probably isn't even all that serious about it.
Right. It's very likely that he doesn't actually worship Satan.
Right.
They're fair enough.
So the fourth person who's here is
Brady Shearer.
Barry Shearer
takes this approach. Brady Shearer is the CEO or editor, main guy of Pro Church Tools, which is a super important online kind of community that specializes in digital nativism and helping people do ministry well online.
Yeah.
And this is what he had to say. He had Lil Nas X is a very savvy digital creator. He's trolling you. It's bait. It's meant to get a response. It's not a culture war. Mm-hmm. It's a young man that grew up on social media trolling you for clicks. And I love this because, again, he references the Lil Nas X tweet. He says, I had 9 months to plan this rollout. Y'all aren't going to win, bro. And I think it perfectly frames the outrage that we need to have over this video and things like this as Christians. The idea here is perspective means everything, right? And when you look at it from Shearer's perspective and then couple that with Whittaker's response, what you get is you get to get past and move beyond all of the intentional anger. And it becomes this nothing burger where you can still say that is not good. I don't affirm any of this, right? I will not show my daughter Sophia this video.
Yeah.
And I actually agree with Lil Nas here. It's I want to be the one who monitors what my kid does, you know? And obviously it's harder because, blah, 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 all those things matter and there's room for that.
Yeah.
But it's I would just talk to her about this and why it seems problematic. And I would try and respond with the Whittaker approach in my own home, and that kind of thing, as we talked about it on a general level. But for Shearer to point this out, it's this reminder that it's all the attention that we pay to things. Attention is the most important currency that exists on the internet, right? And it's if you give your attention, your currency away so flippantly to every single thing that comes across the internet that's offensive, you're not going to have any time for Jesus there because there's so much offensive content on the internet. It's insane.
True.
And as Christians, if we make that our battleground,
right,
it's dude, we're going to lose. There's not enough time in the day.
It also seems like it's the wrong orientation.
Yes.
So if I'm understood as a Christian as what I'm against,
right,
but not what I'm for, what am I doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, on the one hand, my personal response is like, it's not that serious.
Sure.
On the other hand, like, I get the concern, the anger, like, oh, I'm betrayed. Like, my kids were listening to Old Town Road and now this. And like, so I want to be sensitive to that because I don't have kids yet.
And that's a fair response too.
Yeah. But I think these are really, really good perspectives on that. Mm-hmm. You start with like, hold on. Are you being played here? Are we being punked?
Yeah. Yeah.
And if we're not...
Healthy skepticism is good,
right,
in the internet age.
Exactly.
Right.
And if you're not being punked, then is your anger matched with compassion?
Yeah. Yeah. So truer love for people. And I think that's what should, like when I know I'm going to have to talk about it with my students at youth group, right? Somebody's going to bring it up or a parent's going to bring it up.
Yeah.
And it's like, so these, I think, are the types of conversations we need to be having with people in the church that we encounter. It's like, look, you can get online and you can write a status update on your Facebook wall that, you and other people who think like you are going to read, and it's going to be this self-affirming circle, but you're going to be losing, the people who kind of just ghost your stuff.
Right.
You're going to lose them there. And there's a much less inflammatory way that we can discuss these things and still be just as convicted and stand just as firm and be just as intentional without losing witnessing
without having to
value.
Say canceled.
Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah.
Right.
It doesn't have to cost the relational equity that it's seemingly costing a lot of people on the internet right now.
I read a post earlier by a friend, and I really, really appreciated it. He said, "Nuance is so much more powerful than just wielding the sword."
Yeah. Yeah, certainly.
I mean, how amazing is that?
Yeah.
And so as we wrap up this series on cancel culture and revisiting cancel culture as Christians, I want to leave with that sentiment, right? That there are going to be some hills that we need to die on, but a lot of these are not that.
Yeah.
And nuance, charity are so much more powerful than fighting fire with fire.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So what do you guys think? Leave us a comment. Are we off the rocker here? Or is this something that we should be more concerned with? We want to hear from you guys. Keep tuning in and make sure you catch the other videos on our mini-series on cancel culture.
Yeah, and
we'll
then
see you next time.
Also, you can watch us on YouTube, or we also have that app.
That's right.
That people can download.
That's
now,
right.
And it's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
So all of our videos, all of the series, everything you can find there is in the JUCE app. Search for it in the App Store or on Google Play and connect with us.
Absolutely. We'll see you next time on Kingdom Thinking.